Welcome back, I'm Ren from Bluewood Gaming, and today I'm going to be talking about Warhammer 40k Space Wolf. Now, I know that this video is coming out super late. This game has been out for almost a month, and I've actually had it since released. I just never had time to get around to playing it, but here we are. Now, before we get into the actual review, there's one thing that's going to be turning off a lot of people to this game. And that is that this game is a mobile phone game port. Now, don't run away just yet, as they actually did an amazing job porting this over, and they took out some of the features that were kind of crappy in the phone version, but I will be talking about that a little bit later in the review. So let's get right into my thoughts on Warhammer 40k Space Wolf. So starting out, if you don't know much about Warhammer 40k, you're immediately going to be put a little bit behind in this game, as tradition in 40k games, they don't really give much background for the entire galaxy and worlds that 40k takes up. I'm definitely not the person to explain 40k to you if you don't know much about Warhammer 40k, so you're going to want to go look something up about it, or you're just not going to want to play this game. Moving on past that, you can see that this game is a turn-based or a pseudo-turn-based card-based tactical shooter, and I'll get a bit more into how the actual game plays out here in a minute, but that's pretty much the huge overview on what this game is like. Now, the biggest part of this game is the actual card features, or the deck building and whatnot. So that's what I'm going to be focusing on first, as you can really just see and figure out most of the rest of the stuff about the game, but you really do need to play it a bit to figure out some of the stuff about the cards, so that's what I'll be focusing on for right now. And the cards are actually one of the biggest areas, or actually the biggest area, where they changed this from the phone version. In the phone version, you can actually buy packs that give you 5 cards per pack, and you can pay real money for it. In the PC version, they completely took out all the monetary system. You buy this game once, and you don't pay anything else. Cards are much easier to get in this version than the phone version, and that just offsets all the stuff that they took out with removing the payment system. So with the cards that you have, you put them into 3 different decks, and the decks are defined by what armor your main character is wearing, whether he's wearing the light scout armor, the medium just regular power armor, or just a full suit of Terminator armor. And in each of these decks, you can have 30 cards in them. So let's go over what you do with each of these cards and how you get more cards. So the majority of the cards that you're going to be using are weapons, most of which are ranged weapons that have some sort of different range ability on them, depending on what they are. Some of them are melee weapons, others give you armor, some give you health, some are dedicated to drawing more cards or moving your character. Now, you don't have to worry about stocking up on cards that help you move your character, as pretty much every single card in the game can double as a movement card, so you don't really have to throw a whole bunch in and like offset your deck with so few weapons and whatnot. Now, you might think that 30 is a low number to make it through a full game, and essentially the way that they do this is you use a card. At the beginning of each of your turns, you draw a card, then you use up to 2 cards in your turn, which give you a little time amount, which I'll get into in a bit as I talk about the game plays out. But yeah, you use up to 2 cards, and then you discard those cards, and then when you run out of cards to draw from your deck, it kind of reshuffles all of your used cards and lets you continue on like that. So you don't have to worry about the number of cards in your deck. As for each individual card, there are different rarities of cards, anything from common to uncommon, rare, epic, and legendary. And then inside each of those, each card can be leveled up several times, and to do that, You take 2 cards from, say, the first rank of a weapon, and then you can forge those together into 1 card of the rank 2 of said weapon. So now moving on, how do you get more cards? Well, you can forge cards by using a bit of scrap that you actually get by completing missions, or you can just get cards from completing missions, or occasionally you can get packs from completing missions, which each pack gives you 5 cards, at least one of which is an uncommon or higher. You can also pay for packs with scrap, which you get from each mission. And the drop rates for these packs actually seem to be pretty good. In each of about 4 packs, you seem to get a legendary, so your chances of getting a really good card seem to be extremely high when getting packs. And something cool that I've seen that these developers doing is occasionally they'll be throwing out codes that anybody can use to get an extra couple of packs. Like just a couple days ago, they released a code for Steam users where if you redeem the code, you could get 5 packs, and so that was pretty cool. Just kind of helps that along a bit, and you seem to be able to get enough scrap quick enough that it really doesn't take long for you to either forge new cards or buy packs, so that seems to be really great about this game. Now, just to quickly go into a bit more depth about actually forging cards, you can forge on 4 different like crafting difficulties, whether that be simple, average, hard, or extreme. Each one of those difficulties requires more scrap, but it gives you a better chance to get a better item, and the cool part is it actually shows you how much of a better chance that you actually have to get each different item or rarity of item, but you don't actually get to choose what item you get. So let's go into how an actual match plays out. But just quickly before we get into that, there's one gripe that I have about starting up a match, is that they do have different difficulties in this game, but sadly the different difficulties don't equal different results. So if you play on the hardest difficulty, you're going to be getting the same rewards as if you played on the easiest difficulty. So that's kind of a little bit of a nitpick for me. I think that if you're playing on the super hard difficulties, you need to be rewarded for that, but sadly they just don't do that in this game. So back to what I was saying, when you start out in a match, you draw 6 cards of your 30 card deck, and then you can play 2 cards on each of your turn. Now, these cards each have a cost for a time thing, and that is why I said that this game is pseudo turn-based. It actually goes in the order of your of the amount of time that you have left. So if I say use a card that requires 8 time and someone else has 12 time, I could play just that one card in my turn and then be able to take another turn before the person with more time than me. You can see this playing out up on the top right of the screen. You'll see a little time or clock icon and then a number next to that. You can purposefully use less time than someone that's already taken their turn to be able to sneak another turn in before that player or that character is able to take another turn. And speaking of time, the max time that you can have is 20, but do be warned, you can't just stay at 0 time. If you pass your turn or end your turn when you have 0 time on a character, it will automatically bring you up to have 5 time. That way you can't just completely keep going through that character. And at the beginning of each character's turn, everybody loses 2 time counters. So say you are at 5 time counters and your enemy is at 8 time counters. When it becomes your enemy's turn or some other character's turn, each of those would lose 2 time counters. It's everybody in the game, not just people on your side. So that seems pretty fair, and it allows for a few tactical options that you just wouldn't otherwise be able to have if it was a normal turn-based game. Now, continuing on, there's not really much else to talk about the combat and whatnot in this game, as it's a pretty simple to look at and simple to understand tactics game. The difficulty comes from just either AIs being extremely good or other human players that you can play against. Which I'll get into all the game modes here in just a minute. But there's no real gripes that I have with the just basic game-to-game gameplay that you find in this game. And I actually think that this is one of the best tactics-based games in the entirety of the 40k franchise. So moving on, let's talk about the different game modes that you're going to be playing in. The first one that you'll be coming across is the campaign. Now there are 3 different campaigns in this, each of which have about 10 missions, I believe, and they go on a series of just different missions. Now there is like an overarching story among all of these, but it's not really anything that gets too much attention drawn to it. It's just kind of a way to explain how you got from one place to another. The next mode is multiplayer, where you play yourself against another human player. Now, when this game first came out, I was able to find multiplayer matches, but now, after the game's been out for a little bit, it's a little bit harder to find, so I wouldn't buy this game specifically for the multiplayer. The third mode is the challenges. Now, I haven't put much time into this challenge mode, but it does seem to be pretty fun, although it is mostly just wave-based combat, where you mow down a wave of enemies, then another wave comes in, and you mow down that wave, then another wave comes in, and it's really designed to see how long you can last against waves of enemies. So, finishing up, the last thing that I really need to talk about is the settings. There are a few problems that I have with this options menu. The first most glaring one that I found is there is no option for borderless windowed. Now, yes, you can use external programs like Borderless Gaming for that, but it would be nice to actually see a borderless window option actually built into the game. Besides that, a lot of the standard options are really just toggles on and off, like anti-aliasing. It's either you have none or you have all of it. Fog, you either have none or you have all of it. SSA, if I could speak properly, SSAO, either all or none of it. And I'd like to be able to choose a bit more specifically my options, although you don't really have to worry about that because this game can run on pretty much anything. I actually had no problem running this on very high graphics settings with everything on at 4K with no issues. It stayed at a rock solid 60, which this game is kind of locked at whatever your monitor's refresh rate is. The only other things that I really have to say about the options menu is that there's an actual button to reset your progress. I don't really know why you'd want to press that, but they do give you the option, which I kind of wish it was in a separate menu all by itself, or just something that you couldn't just accidentally press. Now, it does bring up a confirmation window, but still, I don't really know why you put in a reset progress button. The only other thing is that this game, well, it does offer several different resolutions, anything from 4K to 1080p, down to 900p. The lowest resolution is 768, which is not exactly the best resolution. I wish it actually went all the way down to 720p, but I understand that in this day and age, it is going to be quite rare if you're not running this game at 1080p. And like I said earlier, I had no problems running this game at 4K, so that was pretty good. And now let's get into my final thoughts and whether or not you should buy Warhammer 40k Space Wolf. And personally, I'm going to make this really simple. I would recommend picking this up on a sale. At the starting price of $17.99, this is a bit hard of a sell for there not being a also active multiplayer, like competitive multiplayer version or aspect to it, just because the players aren't there anymore. Back when this game first came out, sure, I would have recommended picking it up right when it came out, but now I wait for it to go on a sale down to about the $10 price range, as I think that is adequate for what you're actually getting here. It does also have a few of those basic hiccups, like I talked about, that just come from it being a mobile game version or a port of a mobile game. Then I would also recommend picking up the Exceptional Card Pack, which is the only DLC for this game. It is the only thing that you can actually pay for besides the game, and it just gives you a few extra things that help you out quite greatly throughout the game, as when you're first starting out, it's pretty good to have a weapon that deals about 150 or so damage, and with the Exceptional Card Pack, which only costs $3, you're given weapons that do upwards of 400 damage. So I don't know, that's just something that you might want to pick up. Because I like the harder difficulties, that kind of helped along the way when I'm first starting out. Now that I'm a little bit farther into the game, I don't really have to rely on those weapons all too much, but just there. So yeah, that's pretty much it for this. Remember, I'm Ryan from Bluewood Gaming, and as always, I'll see you guys in the next one.